first. So last night, I'll tell you what, Thursday Night Football struck again. It is remarkable. The only, I should say the only good game, one of the only good games of the Thursday Night Football schedule happened to be the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. Big time AFC North clash. For me as a Steelers fan, there's a heightened sense of anticipation for this one. Like, what does this mean for Pittsburgh? If the Bengals can pull it off against the Ravens and we beat the Cleveland Browns on Sunday, obviously I'll predict that game later in the show. All of a sudden, my Steelers are in first place in the division, and, that wasn't even getting to the fact that if Kansas City lost to Philly, then Pittsburgh's the 1 seed somehow of the AFC. But this is not about Pittsburgh. This is about the Cincinnati Bengals, who lost the game, lost the quarterback, and their season is obviously over. That goes without saying because it was reported today that Joe Burrow is out for the season with a torn, with a tear in his wrist. The ligaments torn his wrist, so he's done for the season, which just sucks because I had talked at length over the last few weeks that now with Burrow healthy, the calf looks good. He had the bye week. He looked amazing. It's one of football in San Francisco. Played well the last week against the Houston Texans and comes into this week against Baltimore, riding high. Bengals are playing good football, playing complimentary football, playing a brand of football that is frankly sustainable in the postseason, as we've seen, and now he's done for the season, which is very unfortunate. So there is a lot of second guessing, and I can be guilty of that at times. I mean, we live in this social media, Twitter, instant reaction culture where you have to shift one way or the other wherever the tide falls, or wherever the tide rolls, so to speak. I'm not going to do that, and here's why. The notion that the Bengals should have sat Burrow for this game, or that Joe should not have played this game at all, because we see the report came out mere hours before the game kicked off, where Joe Burrow and the picture of him getting off the plane, he's got the wrapping around his wrist and around his hand. It looks a little suspicious. Okay, there's obviously something there. Of course, second quarter, he's unable to even grip the football in a throwing motion. And so at that point, it is a very bad situation for Cincinnati. I'm going to defend the Bengals. I'm going to defend Joe Burrow in particular. First of all, for Joe Burrow, I'll say the same thing about him that I said about Tua when a far more serious injury, or rather multiple far more serious injuries happened last year when Tua had the concussion problem. I said, listen, I'm not going to get on Tua. Tua is an athlete. Athletes want to play. Whatever. I mean, a lot of times, especially if it's a great athlete, and Burrow, no question, constitutes that. He's a great athlete. He's a great quarterback. Is that when you get to that level, especially we're talking about Joe Burrow, Ohio State transfer, wasn't all that good. If you look at his numbers, his first year at LSU, and then 2019, he blows up, throws 60 touchdowns, wins the Heisman, LSU wins the Natty. He gets drafted number 1 overall, Cincinnati, but then the Bengals are terrible. It's a bad organization that he inherits. And of course, you look at the Bengals now, which prior to Burrow going down, I think all of us, or at least most of us, would agree the Bengals were a very, very real threat in the AFC. When you go through the trials and the tribulations, when you go through the adversity that Burrow, as well as every athlete, especially professional athlete that's ever walked the planet, has gone through, there's a chip on your shoulder. With any successful person, when you work from the gutter to the top, you're always kind of looking over your shoulder. It's not necessarily an insecurity thing. There's always somebody coming after my spot. Now, nobody's coming after Joe Burrow's spot. Unless the guy's name is Patrick Mahomes, nobody's coming after Joe Burrow's spot as the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals. Heck, nobody's coming after Kenny Pickett's spot in Pittsburgh for the time being, at least. But that's in you as an athlete. So I get Burrow playing. For the record, until he went down, Burrow was playing pretty well. I mean, the play he got hurt on was a touchdown pass, or at least the very last play on the drive was a touchdown pass. But Joe Burrow, in the limited actually got, had a passer rating of 100. So he was playing well against the number 1 scoring defense in the National Football League. Was spreading around to Joe Mixon, to Jamar Chase. Again, this is without T. Higgins. I did pick Cincinnati to win this game. And, sometimes stuff happens. Sometimes you do get a re-aggravation of an injury. As for the Bengals, I defend them in the sense that, well, Bryson, time out, Bryson. You said back in week 3, 4, first month of the season, week 3, when they beat the Los Angeles Rams. Remember that game, Monday Night Football, very ugly game. They beat the Rams. It's kind of a defensive battle. Joe didn't play particularly well, but gutted it out through a calf injury and all. And I came on this show, came on this studio, this table, this camera, this set, this microphone, and said, Joe needs to sit the next month because they had an upcoming game. They had upcoming games against Tennessee, against Arizona, and against Seattle. I said, I think they can get out of this at 2-4, or potentially 3-3 at best, but probably 2-4. And I said, get Burrow a month off, get the calf right, because at the end of the day, Cincinnati Bengals' best chance to win a Super Bowl is if Joe Burrow's healthy. We've seen him get to a Super Bowl with an awful offensive line. We saw him get to an AFC title game last year with a beat-up offensive line. We've seen his greatness at the highest level. You want him healthy. You say, well, Bryson, why does that not apply to this? Why aren't you keeping the same energy with the hand injury? Simply put, it's a matter of time. It's a matter of circumstance. The calf injury happened initially in training camp. Remember that video? I literally showed it on this show. He goes down. It's non-contact. We're freaking out. Oh, my God. How hurt is Burrow? Turns out it's not like season-ending. It's not season-threatening. But the Bengals put him out there in week 1 against Cleveland, who they were probably going to lose to even with a healthy Burrow, because Burrow struggles badly, historically at least, against the Cleveland Browns. Early in the season, the Bengals started 0-2 last year, made the conference title game, and lost by 3. Like, this wasn't a situation where the Bengals got to get off to a hot start. Their schedule's brutal early. No, their schedule actually wasn't terrible early. They had the Rams in there, and they had Tennessee, Arizona, Seattle, who they have a matchup advantage over. There's a lot of winnable games in that schedule, even without Joe Burrow. It was this part of a schedule that they needed him healthy for. Again, beyond here, this just adds to the fact that the Bengals season is very obviously over. They have my Steelers, Jaguars, Colts, Vikings, my Steelers again, Chiefs, Browns. They'll be lucky to get out of the season 7-10. Unless, obviously, they upgrade quarterback, which I don't know how they'll be able to do. Nothing against Jake Browning, but the only guy available is Joe Flacco, and the Browns, who are in a bad of a situation as you could possibly be with losing their starting quarterback. They said, nah, we'll pass on Joe Flacco's services. So I don't think the Bengals are getting an upgrade over Jake Browning the rest of the season. It's week 11. This is a potential season-defining game in terms of your ability to compete for the AFC North title. You need a healthy Joe Burrow. If you don't have a healthy Joe Burrow, you'll take whatever Joe Burrow you can get. In this case, unfortunately, it was a Joe Burrow with an injured wrist. Of course, it sucks. I mean, it reminds me of the Kevin Durant situation against Toronto. Kevin Durant had an injured Achilles area. Again, they called it a calf. It was very clearly an Achilles. He tore it not long after. Again, he iced. I remember those videos would come out from KD, and he had the ice like really, really low on his calf, far closer to the Achilles than the calf. I'm like, that's kind of suspicious. And, of course, KD, unfortunately, after playing great, by the way, to start Game 5 of the finals that year against Toronto, there went the Achilles. Very similar with Joe Burrow. He's playing well, spreading the ball around, completion percentage good, pass ratings over 100. And it just goes. It's unfortunate, but for Cincinnati in their defense, they're thinking, okay, short week, Baltimore, probably not going to put a crazy, great game plan in place because it is a short week, not a lot of hitting in practice. Just get through it, see if we can beat Baltimore to beat up Joe Burrow, and guess what we get? A mini bye week. Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. Then you got the week leading up to the Bengals game against Pittsburgh, which we know is a very physical environment, very physical defense. It didn't work. Do I blame them for trying it, though? Do I blame Burrow for playing? I don't. This is not the equivalent of the calf injury. First of all, a calf, and we listen, torn ligaments in the wrist obviously means if you're a quarterback, you're done for. Really, if you play any position other than kicker, you're done for the season. But we know how threatening that an Achilles injury can be. We've seen it to Aaron Rodgers. We've seen it to Kirk Cousins this season. I think we saw it to Daniel Jones, I think, tore his ACL, if I'm not mistaken. We've seen it happen with multiple players this season. Cam Akers tore his Achilles again for the Minnesota Vikings. Stuff happens. You know what happens, so to speak. The Bengals tried to survive this game with an injured Burrow, and it didn't work. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.